that the beneath there could have been an indirect truth. I mean, it's not necessarily, we don't hear Isaac saying, wait, could you say that again, Dad? I'd love to have that other dialogue that comes through this with Isaac saying, wait, that's a little strange the way that you just said that, Dad. Is it the lamb or is the lamb my son? Could you just, go back there? And we don't get any of that the dialogue between them happening there. But I do think that might be going back to like the sort of manipulation or the lack of trust there. What does it mean for Abraham to first say, have his son say, "Are you here?" And his dad says, "Yeah, totally here." And then in the next breath say, "Yep, and you're the sacrifice." It's this, where is the trust going? Where is this relationship happening? For sure. The air is very dry from the smoke out here. I feel like I'm drinking liters of water a day right now. Okay, so first two Hinanis. The first Hinani was when we got to Abraham saying, just responding to God. The second one was Abraham responding to his son. And there's a lot to read into that one and a lot to think about. How do we maintain presence with our family members? How do we make sure that we're not being duplicitous in our I'm here with you? How do we make sure that we're fully focused, or at least giving truthful answers when we're called out on that? The last place in this little, thank you. Yes, we are safe. The fires have now, they say that they're better. The smoke is terrible. The air quality, distraction, but the air quality today is off the chart. They just said it's beyond the 500 that goes on the air quality chart. So, but we are very safe. We're good. Just a little smoky. Like maybe I was going to make a sacrifice at the top of a mountain. I don't know. I'm not gonna, my children are sleeping, so hopefully they can't hear me. Okay. And the last part of this comes from Genesis chapter 22, same place we were in, but now we're going to verses 9 through 12. So this is the actual Akedat Yitzchak. This is when they're up at the altar. And they came to the place which God had told him. And Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Hineni, here I am." And he said, "Lay not your hand upon the lad, nor do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing that you did not withhold your son, your only son, from me." Hineni. This is the one that I feel resonates sort of in my head right now the most when I think about this one, because this is that when you're in the middle of doing 100 different things, or there's so many things happening around us, or we're being pulled in so many different directions, and one more person comes in and says, "Hey, can I get something from you?" And I always wonder if Abraham's Hineni here was this like, "I'm here, like I'm focused," or was it a "what now? Like, you know what I'm doing here. Do you really need something else from me? Is there really anything else I can be giving you?" And it doesn't end there. First of all, he's distracted enough where they have to say, "Abraham, Abraham," before he can respond. He has to hear his name twice. And then all of a sudden he says, "Yeah, I'm here, I'm present." And then he gets asked to stop doing it. So the comment, "or maybe a brief respite from the final act." Interesting. Yeah. It's hard to think about what it is to say Hineni when you're in the midst of doing something so traumatic or so overpowering as we walk in the world. So, like relief, Possibly. Like that he says hineni as though to say like I'm here, and he's sort of like taking a moment before he goes through it. That could be. Sometimes it makes me also think about, so at the one side it's God calling to him again, and it's like really another thing, really another thing. And on the other side it's this, perhaps he's trying to be more present, and by saying hineni he's putting himself fully in the moment in order to recognize what he's doing, almost to say, it's not even, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And you think that like, okay, this name is being called, but he's so fixed in this trance of what he's doing that his response perhaps is not hineni to the angel. His response is this hineni, like, look at what I am about to do. And this is how present I can be. And then he gets stopped because it's clear that he's so in that moment that he doesn't know what he's doing. At least, let's see, he was hoping that a lamb would be substituted, so maybe this is more of a relief. Here I am. Yeah, I mean, it's so, there are so many different ways to read it and to see what it means to say hineni. I know we have just about 5 minutes left to finish this up. I'm loving the comments that are coming through, and if you have more interpretations to throw back, I would love to hear them. And to think, what I was hoping to leave you with in this time is really this idea of how we say hineni and how we show up, and what does it mean to other people when we do it. So when we talk about how Isaac must have felt betrayed by his father when he said, here I am, and yet then said, yeah, we're going to go make a sacrifice, and it's you. We think about the intent we should have when we are present with people, or when we take on relationships, or when we step up to help. And it's not easy. I know that for me, I'm usually the first person to say, how can I help when someone is stressed? And I'm also probably one of the first people to get super stressed and have too much on my plate. So I've had to start working. One of my goals for Elul this year, and it's going to take more than Elul, so it's going to be the whole year, is to actually think about what it means to be present. To say, I'm here to help you, and also say, I can't say hineni because I can't be present in this space. And I think that's okay too. And I wonder if there is a space for us to also not say hineni. I wonder what it would be like if Abraham didn't answer the call in a moment because there was so much else going on. Not that we should luxuriate in our overwhelmed nature, but that we know our limits. And I think those are powerful questions to really hold. Yes, Rachel, you can email me the questions that you have for sure. And he has, looking at this verse, helped you discern how to be present during this time in Portland with the BLM protests. It's something that has been on my mind, saying hineni, primarily because I struggled with what to do and if I should go to the protests or not. They're downtown, only like 20 minutes from here, but I'm the chair of the Oregon Board of Rabbis, and a lot of the rabbis have been going, and I really felt that I wanted to be able to be with them. And they all said to me, you have 2 small children at home. There's no reason for you to come downtown right now. You don't have a gas mask. You don't have appropriate clothing. You don't have, because there's a vest that we have to wear. And then they were talking about all the gas that was being used and all these other things. So it was a moment for me to say, how can I say, here I am, without being physically present in that space? And one of the things that came up for all of us as rabbis here in the group that I run with is that part of being present and saying, here I am, is also about knowing where it's safe to be and where you can put your energy into the world. And so I've been doing a lot of focus. My job was for a couple of weeks to just watch the live stream. And that was my way of saying, here I am, helping those who were there. It also means that I'm not the most present person. I'm giving space for others to share their story. And that was really important as well. So I see that I'm really bothered by the objectification of Isaac in those last few lines.
I'm sorry,
subject.
Rabbi.
So I agree. Do the evaluation, and I'm out.
No, you're good. You're good, Rabbi. and I want to offer my sincerest apologies for misreading the title of your talk, which was Hineni. At this point, it's sort of moot. So, but it's a wonderful talk, and I'm so sorry that I read the wrong title. Really beautiful. Thank you so much for your teaching. And I see that you are also responding to chats and questions along the way. There is in the chat bar, just because the Rabbinical Assembly would like us to be able to learn from this experience, an evaluation form for each and every presentation that's going on. And I feel like we're the luckiest here in the latest hours, because we get the West Coast teachers, and the West is the best, like we have Rabbi Eve Posen here. We're going to move, although we're going to transition now from slightly west all the way to Israel. As far as I understand, we had an Israeli person teaching from Israel before Rabbi Eve Posen. Now we're going to welcome Rabbi Peretz Rodman, who asked the question, does God need to ever do tshuva? Does God need to do tshuva? And so hang in there. I'm reminded of Shavuot, where we're doing a sort of all-nighter, and in this moment, in this period. So I hope we stay up and continue to learn. This last segment, we welcome Rabbi Peretz Rodman to teach us, does God ever need to do tshuva? Welcome, Rabbi.
Yes. Boker Tov Yerushalayim. I'm already been back from my morning minyan for an hour. I want to talk about something that's outside of my area of expertise, because I'm not a theologian. I was trained as a historian and as a rabbi, so I guess I'm supposed to know something about theology. But I'm fascinated by the idea that God is depicted as a person, and the person who has developed this idea in Jewish theology more than anyone is someone who was a professor at JTS. I never studied at JTS, and I only met him once casually here, and that's Professor Yochanan Mufs, who wrote a wonderful book. I think you may be seeing it in mirror image because of the way these things work. The Personhood of God, highly recommended. And I want to read to you, for starters, just a little bit from the introduction that he wrote to his book, and then look at the question of, does God change God's mind? Sometimes I'm going to say his, but obviously God is not gendered. It's just a lot easier than his or hers, and I hate using theirs for singular. So I want to get into that question a little bit. And then we're going to see, because I'm a historian of Jewish thought, not a theologian myself, what people have done with this, both in the biblical tradition and in the rabbinic tradition. What we won't have time to do is see how this idea was developed in Chassidut, but I can point you in direction of things you can read if you find that interesting. So that's where we are. Yochanan Mufs. And I'm going to try to keep an eye on the time. I thank Rabbi Steinberg and the very capable Alex Friedman for helping us out with all of this. So Mufs writes in his introduction about how the God of Israel is one God replacing a whole pantheon of gods. All the things that the gods did in the ancient Near East, one God's got to do. And he writes, he was a whole pantheon in himself about God. And then I'm skipping down a bit. God was a king who in his youth behaved in one way, and in his older age, poetically speaking, yet another. Having learned from his mistakes, he now allowed his mercy, his underlying love for man, his creature, student, and collaborator, to overcome his anger. God could be worshipped by man since he was so much like him. And that's really, I think, what we're about. And we'll come back to that point at the end, I hope, if I remember. I'm going to repeat that sentence and go on to the end of the paragraph. God could be worshipped by man since he was so much like him. He constantly appeared in many and ever-changing roles, lest he be frozen and converted into the dumb idols he himself despised. God was a polyvalent personality who, by mirroring to man his, capital H, many faces, provided the models that man so needed to survive and flourish. Does it sound odd to you to be speaking of the humanity of God? We're not talking about anything like the Christian belief in incarnation of God in a human being's body. We're talking about ways to perceive who God is, how God acts, and ultimately what God wants of us. And I don't think I need to add that obviously we construe all this as metaphor, but it's really only metaphors we have to talk about God. God is, as we see things, beyond our direct perception. So as I said, I'm not going to offer you like a systematic theology, Mishnah Sudura, the personhood of God. But I'd like to look with you at some sources. I'm going to read a couple that you don't have in print. They're very short. And then we have a couple in print that we can look at together. On fast days, like a week from today on Tzom Gedalia. A week from Sunday. No, today is Sunday. On fast days, we read in Bet Knesset from the story of Moshe Rabbeinu pleading with God after the incident of the golden calf not to destroy the Israelite tribes, not to give up on having the people of Israel bring God's message to the world. And we quote Moshe Rabbeinu in Exodus 32:12. Lama yomeru Mitzrayim lemor. Well, actually, it begins a little bit earlier. The Lord said to Moses, I see that this is an am kshe oref, a stiff-necked people. Now let me be, that my anger may blaze forth against them, and that I may destroy them and make of you a great nation. But Moshe implores God not to do that. And he says, Lama yomaru Mitzrayim lemor. Why should the Egyptians be able to say, Bera'ah hotzi'am laharogotam beharim ulachalotam me'al penei ha'adama. You brought them out with evil intent from Egypt to destroy them. Shuv mecharon apecha, turn back from your blazing anger. V'hinachem al hara'al amecha. And JPS translates that as renounce the plan to punish your people. Change your mind. Don't do what you intended to do. And of course, Moshe is successful in that. He offers another reason too at the end. He says, remember your servants, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, from whom you swore to them by yourself and said to them, I will make your right. So you're going to violate your promise, and that's not good for your reputation. It's not fair. It's just not fair. And what are people going to say, about you? So he works on God as though God has emotions to be appealed to. A little bit of pride, a little bit of maybe guilt about the possibility of violating promises. And the result of that is, Vayinachem Adonai. And the Lord renounced the punishment. He changed his mind. Lehinachem is to change your mind, to relent, to go back on what you intended. And the Lord renounced the punishment he had planned to bring on his people. So God, on that occasion at least, did change God's mind. So the author of Shemot thinks. God has emotions. God loves. God gets angry. God even, my colleague Jeremy Tabak has argued in a column for the JTS online Parshat HaShavua mailing, he's argued that God gets carried away from time to time, goes too far. And when you go too far, you sometimes regret it, and you regret your actions. And that implies a need for teshuvah, I think. This conception of God's mind being changed by appeals and arguments has its opponents among the Bible's many voices. In the book of Numbers, in Bimidbar 23:19 to be precise, at the beginning of Bilam's second speech to Balak, he says, after addressing Balak by name, Lo ish el vichazev. God is not man not to come through, to be capricious, is how JPS translates it. Uven adam v'yitnecham, or mortal to change his mind. Would he speak and not act, promise and not fulfill? Right? Hahu amar v'lo ya'aseh v'diber v'lo yikimenna. I mean, isn't that the image of God that we praise when we finish a haftarah and we say that God is ha'omer ve'oseh, the one who does, says, and then does. Hamedaber u'mekayem, who speaks and then fulfills what he's said. Shekol dvarav emet v'tzedek, all of whose words are truth and correctness. That image of a static, unchanging God, a God whose perfection is attained, who has nothing more to learn, was the centerpiece of medieval rationalist Jewish theology, as in most classic example, Maimonides. But it wasn't the only strand, and maybe not the major theme, in the theology of the rabbis of Chazal, the rabbis of formative Judaism, Mishnah and Talmud and classic Midrash. So let's take a look at two Midrashim that portray a God with emotions, a God in the process of assessing situations, making decisions, reflecting on what he himself, again, sorry about the gendered language, he himself has done. Let's see what God needs to do when God decides that God's actions have gone too far, have done an injustice. And at the end, we'll ask, so do we have a role in all of this? Is there something that we're supposed to do as a result of understanding God this way? Text number 1. You have the source that you can link to from Dropbox, but I don't know how capable you all are. I always have trouble with Zoom to have one window open or another device open. So I'm going to share my screen.
Rabbi, it's also in the chat box if people.
Yes, the link is in the chat box if you want to do that. But I'm also going to, you don't need to see my face and my wall hanging in the back. So I'm going to share the text on screen, and if that works for you, great. I suspect that may help some people out. I just need a moment to make that happen, and I hope that I have the share screen function. Good, text 1 is there, good. All right, so let's find that. I apologize for the just a bit here. Let's see if this should be the one. And let me share it. And would one of you tell me whether that actually shows up nicely or not on the screen?
It shows up nicely. If you can make it a little bigger, it would be helpful.
Yeah, we're going to work on that. That was 150%. Let's try it at about 180. I find that 200 is often too big. Better? Or you have to center it into page there. How's that?
It's better, thank you.
Okay, good enough to be useful? Otherwise, I'll take it off.
No, keep going. You're good.
Great, thank you. Okay, this is from Eicha Rabbah, classic Midrash collection on Eicha, on Lamentations. And it's a petichta, a particular kind of literary form where you start off not talking about what everybody expects you to talk about as a sermonizer, as a darshan, but taking something from totally far afield somewhere else in the Bible, not from Eicha at all, beginning with that, interpreting a text, and the literary tension that's built is, how is the darshan going to bring this back to talking about what we're talking about? What does this have to do with anything? So he's starting off with this verse. Vayikra Adonai Elohim tzvaot bayom hahu livchi ulemisped. Now that doesn't sound like it has nothing to do with Lamentations and Tisha B'Av and all that. Another interpretation of, and in that day did our Lord, the God of hosts, called to weeping and to lamentation. But who's weeping and for what? And let's see. B'sha'a shebikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu lachriv et Beit HaMikdash. At the time when the Holy One sought to destroy the temple, Amar kol zman shani betocho ein umot ha'olam nogi'in bo. Hey, I protect this place. As long as I'm here, the nations of the world, the other people out there, can't touch it. The Beit Mikdash, the temple in Jerusalem, is safe. Ela echbosh et einai mimenu. But I'm going to look away. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to cover up my eyes, I think is a more literal reading. Ve'eshava shelo ezakek lo ad et ketz. And I'm going to say that I'm just not going to need this thing. I'm not going to have anything to do with this. I'm done with this Beit Mikdash, and I'm done with you people, Israel, Judah. Vayavo'u ha'oivim vayacharivu oto. Then came the enemy and destroyed it. Miyad nishba hakadosh baruch hu bimino. He held up his right hand and swore with his right hand up and placed it behind him. And that's the meaning of the verse in Lamentations. He has drawn back his right hand from before the enemy. And he made an oath, and then, I don't know, is that like crossing your fingers and putting it behind your back? I'm not really sure what that's about. B'ota sha'a nichnesu oivim lehechal usrafuhu. And that's when the temple was destroyed. When God decided to step back and let it happen, boom, the enemy bursts in and burns it down. And when it was burnt, the Holy One, blessed be He, said, that's it. I no longer have a dwelling place in this land. Ba'aretz, I don't think it means in this land. I think it means on earth. Asalek shchinati mimena. I'm out of here. I'm taking my shchina away. I'm going back where I came from, right? I had told the people of Israel wandering in the wilderness that they should build a mishkan and a mikdash, and I will live among them in this thing. It's a good priestly religion and biblical religion. Well, it's over. It's gone. I'm out of here. I'm going back to where I came from and ascend to my former habitation. And that explains a verse in Hosea. Next paragraph. באותה שעה היה הקדוש ברוך הוא בוכה ואומר, אוי לי, מה עשיתי? השריתי שכינתי למטה בשביל ישראל, ועכשיו שחטאו חזרתי למקומי הראשון, חס ושלום שהייתי ישחוק לגויים ולעג לבריות. God's thinking about, ruminating, that's the word I'm looking for, on what God just did. At that time, the Holy One, blessed be He, wept and said, Oi, woe is me, oi me. What have I done? I caused my Shekhinah to dwell below on earth for Israel. That was a favor I did them. And now that they've sinned, I've left, I've returned to my former habitation. Heaven forfend that I become a laughter to the nations and a byword to human beings. That's not entirely clear immediately, but I think the point is not, I would have been a laughing stock if I hadn't done it. I think it's, kind of like what Moshe said before. What are people going to say? What have I done? I've abandoned that people that, I have that special relationship with. B'ota sha'a ba Metatron, one of the angelic hosts that accompanies God up there and is involved in dialogue, like projections of God's personality in different directions, talking back to him. Metatron fell on his face and spoke before the Holy One, blessed be He. Ribono shel olam, ani evkeh v'ata lo tivkeh. It's unbecoming of God to weep. So let me do the weeping. You be God. Unchanging, stoic, sticking to your guns. Amar lo, God replied now to Metatron. Im ein ata maniach li livkot achshav v'kanes l'makom she'en lecha reshut l'kanes ve'evkeh. If you won't let me cry, as if Metatron has power over God, if you're not going to let me cry, weep, I will repair to a nice, good, beautiful verb. I will repair to a place to which you do not have permission to enter, and I will weep there. I'm going to go in my room and I'm going to cry. Right? Leave me alone. I've got to cry over this. I think I juvenilized God too much there in that picture a second ago. I have to do this. This is something serious. I deserve to. I ought to. They deserve. Everybody deserves that I should really regret what went on and weep about it and think about it. Amar lahen hakadosh baruch hu lamalachei hasharet. Of course, that explains the verse in Jeremiah too. The Holy One, blessed be He, said to the ministering angels, come, let us go together and see what the enemy has done with my house. Now that I've done this and I've disappeared and I took a powder, I thought, well, let's go see what happened. Bo'u nelech, ani ve'atem, v'nireh beveiti ma asu oivim bo. One of the lovely things about reading, at least the quotations in rabbinic literatures, they're often, Hebrew is simple enough that, a second grader and third grader, as a native speaker, can understand them. Miyad halach hakadosh baruch hu malachei hasharet v'yirmiyah lefanav. He took Jeremiah with him and he went down to see. He and the ministering angels, they send a commission of inquiry. They don't send. He is the commission of inquiry to see, well, what's happened since I left. V'chevan shera'a hakadosh baruch hu et beit hamikdash amar bevadai zehu beiti v'zehu menuchati. Shabau oivim v'asuvo kirtzonam. This is my house and my resting place into which enemies have come, and they have done with it whatever they wished. Oh my gosh, look at what's happened here. I can't help but think of all the people in Oregon whose towns are totally wiped out, all those people in the West whose homes are gone are going to go back soon and have this sense of, oh my God, what's happened? Not relevant to the point, but it's what comes up in my thinking. באותה שעה היה הקדוש ברוך הוא בוכה ואומר, אוי לי על ביתי, בניי היכן אתם, כהניי היכן אתם, אוהביי היכן אתם, מה אעשה לכם, התריתי בכם ולא חזרתם בתשובה. At that time, the Holy One, blessed be He, wept and said, Oi, woe is me from my house. My children, Bnei Israel, where are you? My priests, where are you? You're not there anymore. My lovers, the people who expressed love for me by bringing sacrifices in this place. Where are you? God doesn't know where they are. God laments that they're not there. This isn't happening. That whole sacrificial cult is gone. What shall I do with you, seeing that I have warned you, but you didn't repent? It's your fault. I mean, I gave you plenty of warning, and you didn't. But God is torn. The story goes on, and we're not going to read to the end, which is fascinating, and I can happily send you to a print source for it if you'd like. For one thing, it's in David Roski's collection, The Literature of Destruction. Great length. God has come to a point at which God says, wow, look what I did. So my question here is, does God owe anyone an apology here? Does God owe an apology to the people, to the priests? Is this tantamount to an apology? We're not quite there though, right? It's not quite at the, I never should have done this. I wish I didn't do this. It's only at the point of, wow, look at what's happened. Look how horrible the results of what I decided to do are. And here the regrets are in terms of what God has brought on God's self. Oy li, woe is me, what am I to do now? So I think we're close, but we're not quite there. But we do have a second text, which I think really gets us there. And it's going to take me just a second. Let me unshare. There are no chat questions yet, so I'm going to go on. But if you want to ask about this or anything else, or we'll have a couple of minutes at the end, I'm pretty sure to talk. Let me get up onto the screen, text number 2, which you may also have. I think if I have to actually click share, that'll be helpful. That is not the right one that I'm looking at. And this is, whoa. Okay. And I should enlarge it. But that may be too large. Let's see if I can get it all. I think that does it. Please tell me if the text is off the edge of your screen and this isn't useful. Otherwise, I'm going to assume it's okay.
I can see it, Rabbi.
Great, thanks. So this is from the Talmud Bavli this time, Masechet Chulin 60b. But before we read the Talmudic passage, we need to see the background in Parashat Pinchas. We read this every Rosh Chodesh. I'm sure many of you, I'll bet many of you could recite it in Hebrew by heart. On your new moons, present a burnt offering, an olah, to the Lord. 2 bulls of the herd, 1 ram, 7 yearling rams without blemish, right? Shivat tamimim. Ushlosha esronim solet. Along with each of the animal sacrifices comes a meal offering, a grain offering, 3/10 of a measure of choice flour with oil mixed in, and for every ram, 2/10, and as a meal offering for each lamb, 1/10 of a measure, 1 isaron, right? V'niskehem chatzi hahin, and their libations come with that too. We always think about the animal sacrifices, but whoa, there was all sorts of other stuff that got burnt up with them on the altar. V'niskehem chatzi hahin yeh lapar u'shlosha shlishi tahin la'ayil revi tahin, some portion of a hin of wine on the altar. U'seirizim echad lechatat ladonai. I didn't look a bunch of translations up. The JTS translations read the Lamed of Ladonai very literally, and there shall be 1 goat as a sin offering. Now, in newer translations, it'll say a purification offering. The standard interpretation until Jacob Milgram upended our thinking about it half a generation ago was that chatat, that kind of sacrifice, is a sin offering. It's to take away, to compensate in some way for a sin committed. Ladonai, a sin offering to the Lord. But that word Ladonai, we're going to see a very different take on now in the Midrash. And here we go. Bavli Chulin 60b. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi Rameh. Rameh means he took 2 verses and showed that they somehow don't seem to fit together quite right. Something's wrong here. There's an inconsistency. 1 verse says, K'tiv, Vayas Elohim et shnei ha'ma'orot ha'gedolim. You probably have heard this story. Vayas Elohim et shnei ha'ma'orot ha'gedolim. In the story of the creation of the world, in the first chapter of Genesis, we hear that God made 2 great lights in the sky. Uchtiv, Et amora gadol le'mamshel tayom, et amora katon le'mamshel talayla. It doesn't say that, right? God made two great lights, but then it says the great light, amora gadol, and the small light. The word is in Hebrew, not comparative. They're just descriptive. The big one and the small one. Wait, a second ago there were two big ones, and now there's only one big one and one small one. What just happened here? There's a switcheroo going on within the verse, or maybe they're. I think it's in the same verse. So now the Midrash is going to fill in what happened. Amra yareach lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The moon said at a certain point after the first part of the verse, going to create these two big lights. Ribono shel olam. Efshar l'shnei malachim sheyishtamshu b'cheter echad. Ribono shel olam, sovereign of the universe. Is it possible for two kings to wear one crown? Amar lahem l'chi umati et atzmech. So then you go and make yourself smaller, so that there aren't two great lights competing for who's the great light. Amar le. Amra lefanav ribono shel olam hoil v'amarti lefanecha davar hagun amit et atzmi. Well, I'm going to get punished because I point out that there's a problem, right? Because I have suggested that which is proper. I must make myself smaller. Amar la. God replies to the levana, the moon. L'chi umishli bayom uvalayla. So you go and you will rule by day and by night. You can see the moon during the day, and you can see the moon at night. The sun doesn't get any time at night. You're going to get both. You're smaller, but hey, you're going to get both. Doesn't work. Moon's not convinced. Amrale, my ravute, what's the value of this? Right? Of what use is a sharaga, a lamp in broad daylight? Right? What am I going to be during the day? Like I'm an afterthought. You barely see me. The sun's out. Oh, there's a moon too. Yeah. That's compensation. Thanks a lot. Amarla. Zil. Limno v'cha Yisrael yamim v'shanim. Go. Yisrael shall reckon by you the days and years. We have a lunar calendar, right? Our months are based on the molad, when you see the moon. But knowing already what the Jews are going to do with the calendar, the moon says, but it is impossible to do without the sun for the reckoning of the seasons. Right? And you even say so yourself, God, v'hayula otot l'moadim. Let them be for signs, both of them, for signs and seasons and days and years, the moon and the sun. Okay, you know what? How about this? We're going to have all kinds of chachamim. We're going to be known as the smaller one. Small's not bad. Small's beautiful. Right? I've got Yaakov HaKatan, Shmuel HaKatan, David HaKatan. Chazye dela ka miyatva, I think that would be da'ata. I'm seeing that God, that the moon, would not be consoled. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Haviu kapara alai, shemi'atati et hayarech. Bring an atonement from me, for making the moon smaller. That is what was meant by Shimon ben Lakish when he declared, I thought he was Ben Pazi a minute ago. Why is it that the he-goat offered on the new moon is distinguished, and that it is written concerning it unto the Lord, Ladonai? Don't read it as Ladonai, for God, to God, on God's behalf. Because the Holy One, blessed be He, said, Sa'ir zeh yehei kapara al shemi'atati et hayarech. I need kapara. I did the wrong thing. I shouldn't have done what I did to the moon. And every month, the Jewish people will bring a sacrifice to clear me of that wrongdoing, maybe even to remind me of it. And what does God regret here? God has mistreated the moon. So does God owe an apology? Apparently so. More than an apology, God seems to feel that God needs to offer some compensation. But the compensation offers were turned down by the victim, so God proposes a monthly act of contrition. I said that toward the beginning of our half an hour, we'll ask at the end, do we have a role here? In this midrash, we do. We do kapara for God every month. We used to when we could, bring a sacrifice, a chatat. And remember that even God messed up. God, trying to do the right thing, not with really evil intent, slighted someone who was hurt and never got over it. And God continues to remind God's self of this all the time through the sacrifice. More important, of course, is our striving to emulate God in this story and not just be the one serving God's need at the end. Even God gets carried away, does something wrong and regrets it and tries to make some sort of restitution and maybe learn a lesson for next time. Need I spell out the conclusion then for those of us who are thinking about our actions over the past year. So may we all recognize our failures, take steps to make restitution, and resolve sincerely to act differently next time, and maybe make some arrangement to be reminded on a regular basis of the things that we screw up on, have screwed up on, don't want to screw up on again. God has become, in this kind of a theology, where there's a personhood of God, what educators would call an accessible role model. Not just a role model, but an accessible role model. We can emulate God as God acts in this story. And I think that is, of course, the point of the story. Comments, questions? Anybody still awake at this ridiculously late hour?
Yeah, Rabbi, it really was a beautiful teaching, and we are so grateful to be able to connect with you in Israel, here in America. I don't know who's up, as you asked. Your teaching was beautiful. I certainly was stimulated and grateful for the opportunity to learn with you. And as we know, the Jewish calendar continues to push us toward renewal and introspection, and to the greatest reality, which are spiritual reality connected to God and to one another. And here we are on this Selihot evening, learning from one another. And so thank you so much. Thank you to Alex, who has
thank you, Alex.
Who has been doing the yeoman's work with regard to the technology. Thank you to you all who you found your way here on a Saturday evening when you had a million other opportunities, but you chose to do Torah, and you chose to be connected to all of us. And you, along with another 175 other congregations across not only the United States, but around the world. And we have learned together, and we have smiled, and we have come together and to celebrate the coming together of this new year. And so thank you so much this evening. I don't know if there's any other announcements that I'm supposed to make at this time. I'm doing the best I can, but Rabbi Rodman and Rabbi Posen and Rabbi Estrin in this last leg, thank you, and to thank all of you. And I wish you a Shana Tova.
Laila Tov, Shana Tova.